Well, welcome, especially to Özge, to this science chat. It's the first one after the summer holidays, and we were away for quite a while. I was hoping to have some more people, but we'll see. Maybe some more people join in later, because we actually have a really interesting talk coming up, which is a kind of cool kickoff for the Student Service Camp that's happening next week online. And I think this is a really cool introduction in the topic of the Monday's lecture and panel discussion. Yeah, I'm actually going to just give the word to Özge, and then you can do the presentation, and afterwards we'll have time for some questions.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me, and thanks everybody who's for joining us this evening. I hope that it's evening everywhere, not early in the morning or an inappropriate timing. I will start sharing my screen, and then I will start introducing myself. Yeah. Right. So I'm Özge. I am originally from Turkey, and right now I am a lecturer at Mehmet Akif Ersoy University in Burdur, in southwest of Turkey. I recently started my job, and I recently actually finished my PhD in May this year. So it was a quick transition for me from student, so-called student, to a lecturer. I have a background in sociology. I have a background both in sociology and geography, and I have a master's degree in sociology from the University of Edinburgh in the UK or in Scotland. And I have a PhD degree from the University of Humboldt in Berlin, in Germany. And today I'm going to tell you about how corruption intermingles with the hydropower sector in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So this talk is driven from two of these papers that I've published in 2019 and 20. And they're asking two key questions related to the hydropower sector, mainly in Bosnia, but also overall hydropower boom in the world. First paper asks, is the hydropower boom actually taking place? The question is on the title. And the second question, the second paper asks, if not, and what could be the consequences of these on-paper hydropower boom, so to say. Brief content. First, I will give the background information, and then I will tell you why I suggest that the hydropower boom is largely remaining on paper, and why it is likely to remain in the future too, and how corruption takes place in the hydropower sector in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and its potential social, economic, and ecological consequences, if you may. The hydropower makes nearly 16% of the world's total electricity produced, and it has the higher proportion of the total global renewable energy sources. It is estimated that 1.3 gigawatts hydropower remains untapped. And advocates of the hydropower development claims that benefiting from this potential will boost sustainable development, especially in developing and transition countries. While the opponents argue that installing almost 4,000 more hydropower plants will have irreversible socio-ecological problems, but there is one common point of these two sides, is that both anticipates that this boom is likely to take place. Here you see some statistics from around the world, that the numbers of the materialized projects, you see that in Turkey it's on nearly 12% of those planned projects have been materialized, while in Nepal and India this percentage is much lower. And you see how the plant and the under implementation, the number of plant and under implementation projects have massively different from each other, especially in Southeast Europe. And these are statistics from 2019. And this discrepancy, unfortunately, has not attracted enough scholarly attention so far. And that was the key point of my PhD as well. And Bosnia and Herzegovina is a country located in Southeast Europe. And sustainable development in Bosnia and Herzegovina, similar to other countries who are in European Union harmonization process, is a key point for development. And hydropower's role here in Bosnia is quite important because they have high technical hydropower potential, and they have this familiarity with this sector from the time of Yugoslavia. And therefore, the total number of planned projects has reached above 300 so far. And corruption is one of the key challenges in all sectors of Bosnia in terms of development. And for instance, an estimated 200 million euros of EU funding in the years between 2008 and 18 earmarked for hydropower had been used for undocumented transactions. And shortly about my methods, I applied a case study research starting from a small village located in the city called BiH. You see very tiny little BiH on the northwest of the country, and from there I applied my methodology to the country, and then I wanted to see how this reflects globally. But this wasn't the main objective for sure. And my field research took place in 2016 and 2017 across the country in the main cities. I interviewed 65 people, including bureaucrats, decision makers, locals, and activists, and investors and consultants, and whomever is necessary to gather information for this work. And this main objective of this first paper that I just mentioned was to understand whether the hydropower boom is taking place in Bosnia and Herzegovina. You see the distribution of the hydropower plants and projects in Bosnia in 2017. This map is from Riverwatch, a Neuronatur's website. And here you see how these projects have been distributed in terms of their sizes and phases in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Please pay attention that the number of planned projects are the majority. And also another majority, the key aspect of this graph is that the majority of those projects are with less than 10 megawatt installed capacity, which means, according to Bosnia and Herzegovina's terms, they are small projects. I say this like this because in some of the countries, small projects have different definitions, but the general understanding about small projects are those with less than 10 megawatt installed capacity. And this is one of the key things that we should keep in mind here, that most of them are planned and most of them are small projects. And so we said that most of those projects remain are at the phase of planning, and they have been remaining like this for more than 10 years. And this is for 3 reasons. First of them is overambitious planning, and larger potential means greater subsidies, which leads so-called corrupt actors to take advantage of these and apply for concessions without proper feasibility studies. And also, this overambitious planning leads to lack of funding opportunities because there is not enough funding for all those projects to be materialized. And this is a neglected fact by the officials. And this leads again to so-called corrupt actors to obtain several concessions at once, but driven from the fact that the planning has not been done properly. Because on paper, everything looks like that, like hundreds and maybe thousands of hydropower plants can be materialized in both in technical and ecological terms. And this also creates an alternative way to make money for corrupt actors, which comes with concession trading. So these actors, based on the fact that there is a lot of planning, hydropower planning going on in the country, they obtain several concessions at once. And once they realize that there is lack of funding, they start doing concession trading. And this is based on the gaps in the law. But then this becomes kind of a business in Bosnia and Herzegovina, where the actors on purpose by knowing that they are not going to be able to build these hydropower plants, but they obtain several concessions again to somehow to trade these concessions to the investors who are not aware of the situation in the country, which are mostly foreign actors. And in conclusion, these multifaceted problems makes me conclude that this hydropower boom is unlikely to happen to the extent foreseen. But this is not the end of the problems, of course. Sorry about that. Yeah, so the second paper, in the second paper, I wanted to look at how corruption intermingles with the hydropower sector to see what kind of problems might occur due to this on-paper hydropower boom. If you know Bosnia and Herzegovina a little bit, you must have heard about how complicated their administrative system is. They have, to shortly explain you, they have two entities, which autonomous entities, Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina and Republika Srpska, and they have autonomous energy strategies, and most of their system are autonomous from each other. So which makes like all these actors to do whatever they want without even letting the other entity know. Sometimes even not letting the state, the actual state, know. And in the federation part on the left side of me, on the federation part, it becomes more complicated because then they have cantons, and these cantons are also autonomous from each other, which means that they can make decisions independent from the other cantons, although they had to let the other cantons know, also the higher authorities. But this becomes kind of a challenge. There is because they can do somehow whatever they want, because there is no proper control mechanism above them. And also there is municipalities below them, and these municipalities also play around of the rules and everything, but I will just go to that part in a bit. And in Republika Srpska, although the system looks a little bit less complicated than federation part, it is still complicated, because then there is like all these water systems, they're all connected, right, in the country, not even across borders. So making decisions without the other authorities know is a huge problem in the country already. And this extraordinary complicated administrative system creates a country with prevalent corruption. And corruption in the hydropower sector takes place at every phase of the projects. From the beginning, which means the project selection and identification, following the planning, following the bidding and evaluation and contracting, and in the end, the implementation part. I mostly focused on the project selection and identifying and planning part, because this was also contracting part. I didn't go to the implementation part because I look at the on-paper hydropower pool. And you see how different strategies have been used, and this is just a summary of what's really going on. And you see the items marked with a star, also the red pieces are found to pertain to my case study as well. And this also becomes, in a way, that, as I mentioned, this creates a system where the officials are unaware of their duties. So when I was talking to some of the officials, they didn't really know what was their role in this position exactly. And also, no investigation or monitoring is taking place at the majority of these planning processes because of this reason. Yeah, an official can say, I don't know what I should monitor and investigate, and this leads a surface like free for game. Yeah, and in this case, small projects have also key importance because they're also exempt from investigation according to the existing rules as well. So the system, to sum up, the system is already fragile for corruption because of this lack of investigation and monitoring. Plus, small hydropower projects, even if there is investigation and monitoring, they're exempt from all these investigation processes. So there is everyday corruption in the country, and this comes together with a massive hydropower bureaucracy in the country, and there's also unmonitored small projects despite this situation. And this creates an invisible space for corruption in the end, because small projects remain unseen, difficult to track. So if you're a corrupt actor, you would be happy to have this environment and in business environment so that you can do whatever you want somehow. And in conclusion, to repeat, there is this increasing corruption risk in the sector, especially in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but also similar in the other countries in the region and also in the world. And this leads to the point that water rights are in danger because all these projects goes on with the concessions, and what I've been talking about was about concessions. And a concession means that an actor can have the rights of this water to generate electricity, but then there's this risk first that if you're, let's say, proper investor, if you have a concession and if you realize that you cannot move on with the project, and if you don't want to trade your project, and what are you going to do with all these concessions? And imagine all these actors who on purpose obtained all these concessions, and there is this corruption in the country. Therefore, my highlight here is that there is a redefinition of water rights are necessary, because then there's a risk of the government to redefine the scope of the concessions that are obtained for hydropower plants, because then there will be hundreds of business people who has power in the country, who have political power in the country especially, and they will go to the officials and then they will say, hey, I have, I don't know, 8 concessions and I cannot build all this hydropower plants, so how do we proceed with that? So this is a risk of losing water rights for the local people, because then the officials might extend the scope of these concessions and then tell them, okay, then you can do plus this and this if you cannot build hydropower plants, which is going to lead a lot more socio-ecological problems than maybe building this hydropower plants in the end, because then the people are going to lose their water rights, not only on paper, but also in real as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Özge. Very different perspective than most of us have looked at it, I think, for a while. Yeah, for everyone, feel free to unmute yourselves, especially since we're a small group. I think it's feasible to just have a discussion all together. I'll kick off with some questions that came to mind for myself, at least, but everybody can just comment with questions. First of all, this last thing you said, the water rights, have you seen that with a concrete example already, that people have actually suffered, that there's been a step towards extending the water rights from a concession to maybe extraction of water? Or
no, that wasn't the case. I mean, fortunately, I would say that wasn't the case, but this was kind of like a worry in my mind all the time, that this could be in the end the potential result of this process of the on-paper hydropower boom in the country, because then first you say, oh, hey, these hydropower plants are not being built as an ecologist, and then you say, wow, but then there's so many people who are holding these concessions, and these people have power, in the political power in the country actually, and they are mostly the corrupt business people who are very famous of being corrupt. And then you say they're not going to leave these concessions free, just like this, you know, I cannot build a hydropower plant, so I just go. No, this is not the reality, and then the reality might be more dangerous than what we assume right now in the end, and this is related to losing water rights.
Right. Gary, thoughts? That's it. Hey, and considering this is so much the context of these countries, and I think more countries around the world, right? You're from Turkey yourself, but I'm thinking like the Netherlands pretends to be quite clean on those things, but I could imagine even there's some corruption. But would this be the same story for other developments of energy resources, or is it also that hydropower really is easy to be corrupted? That makes sense.
Well, of course, the corruption can take place anywhere, yeah, and everywhere in the world as well. And this could be, if you can hide it properly, then you can say there's not much corruption going on in this country. It depends how well you can hide with your regulations and law, yeah. And in the end, this could lead, of course, there's corruption everywhere, and then of course there's corruption out of the sector of hydropower, yeah, all these renewables and everything. I know from Turkey, I was working for a consultancy company before I start my master's degree, and in this environmental consultancy company, and yeah, I was just about to say some stories from Turkey. I have a lot of stories from Turkey as well. I was working for this consultancy company, and then we were writing some environmental impact assessment reports. And in one report, we were saying that like the wind energy is the best source of renewable. And then another report was saying that hydropower is the best. And another report was saying that nuclear is the best, yeah? And it was said by the same people. It's not so simple just because I just say it's so simple. It takes a lot of intermingling with the rules, because these environmental impact assessments have been assessed by the state as well, yeah? So they look at your report and they read it, and then they read all these details, and then they tell you, okay, so the hydropower is so good, we are convinced, so we let it go. And then they read, oh, wind turbines is so good, so we let them go. And the solar is so good, and then we let them do it, yeah? And this is maybe not an economic corruption by itself, but this is playing around with the rules. We underestimate the definition of corruption. We always think that the corruption takes place mostly at the economic or at the political arena, but corruption takes place in everyday lives of the people, because we then fool them, yeah, if I may, or we just cheat them. And cheating at any point in anything, any decision, is just a corrupt act in the end. Yeah, I can be a corrupt person by myself. Maybe I wouldn't call myself corrupt. I will just call myself cheater. But by definition, this makes me a corrupt person too. So yes, I believe that at every sector, free from renewables as well, corruption takes place. But hydropower has some kind of vulnerability in comparison to the other sectors right now, because first, it's more popular. Second, you have water in charge, yeah, and this water can have different volumes by year, and this depends at the climate, also the climate change and everything, and this also affects the measurements. But with the solar, for instance, there are not much changes, so to say, yeah, similar to water measurements. If there is certain level of water, solar power you receive to some point of the world, then you cannot really cheat with that, in a sense that you can cheat with water. That way,
Right.
that makes water more vulnerable in the end.
So that actually said that it's important to have a good monitoring of the water levels and stuff, because otherwise it's easy.
Well, there was this fun story from one of these activists in Bosnia. Activist in Bosnia, and she was saying a story of an investor that he obtained a concession without a proper feasibility study for a hydropower plant. So his idea was truly to build a hydropower plant there, but then when he went to this location, he realized that there was no water there, because nobody actually went there to do measurements. So they were just like playing around with the numbers of the old years, previous pre-war statistics and everything. And then they were expecting to have a certain level of hydropower from the time of 1990s, yeah? So this is even the case for those who are trying to play around with the rules, that everybody can lose at some point.
Cool. Ali, you've got a question.
Hello. Thank you for your presentation. Really good to have a new view side, let's say. I have a question. Do you think that groups like us, that we are so fighting for the rivers, and we are obviously against hydropower development, so maybe some of your messages surprise us in a positive way. But do you think that we as a group fighting for rivers can help the fight against corruption in a sense? Do you think that hydropower has such a big player in the corruption in, for example, Bosnia, that actually telling people about all these projects and problems would help in the fight against corruption? And if you think so, have you thought about it? Do you have any ideas what's important, what can be done?
Well, thank you. I think one thing that I haven't mentioned, which is one of the key informations, is that everybody's aware of this fact that corruption is taking place everywhere and at every point, especially in Bosnia. If I have to speak about my experiences, also my data from the country, everybody's aware of corruption in the country, how prevalent it is, and how much it is one of the key things. Like one of the bidding experts that I interviewed, he was saying that if you want to do business in this country, you have to be corrupt, and that's the end of the sentence, yeah. And that's everyday people, like people on the street, they also say so. If you want to get a diploma from a university in Bosnia and Herzegovina, from a private university, you have to bribe. If you want to go to the hospital and if you want to like see the doctor, you have to bribe. And if you, I don't know, do anything in this country, you have to bribe. And if you don't bribe, then there's something wrong with you, yeah? And that's somehow the sad part. Of course, there are some people who are saying, some scientists saying that we cannot call this corruption, yeah? But I disagree. We have to call this corruption because we have to have certain level of ethics in a country. What they argue is that if the corruption takes place like at every point, and this is kind of a gift giving, or this is kind of managing the social relations, they say we don't have to call this corruption, or even if we say this is corruption, then we don't have to like get angry to them that they let doing people do this, yeah? But I disagree, I'm sorry, because like there should be a certain level of ethics, because there might be people who doesn't wish, or who doesn't, let's say, even if we accept the fact that corruption is everywhere, then there might be people who cannot give bribes, yeah? Then there will be the people who are going to like have little resources in comparison to the others. And that's the sad part. And fighting against corruption, I don't believe it's my, or it's not my case, because I don't live in Bosnia, yeah? Corruption in Turkey is my case, because I live in Turkey right now. And corruption in my own country as a citizen is my problem, yeah? And I can fight, I can try to fight against that with my own individual tools, yeah? But as a researcher, or as, let's say, someone who is like worried about the situation in the country, I cannot do anything about it. This is not pessimism, but this is to give the will to the people. And this is how we learn in life as human beings. I'm not trying to say big words here, but if people sell their land to the corrupt actors by knowing that they are going to lose their water rights, I cannot stop that, especially if the government doesn't want to change anything about it. But what we can do is to repetitively saying this is not right, yeah? And this might trigger some social tension, yeah? And especially in countries like who, if you're like, I don't want to say it like this. Let's say I live in Germany, yeah? And I know that most of the German people, they value a lot about what, let's say, the British people think about them. And then if the British people say something to Germans, I'm just like generalizing, I'm sorry if there is any German here, if any German listens to this, I'm just like giving a stupid example, yeah? Just to explain my point. And if a British person says that I don't like this about Germans, and I say as a Turkish person, I don't like about this, like this about Germans, it's not going to have the same effect on the same person, yeah? So this is I'm sorry, but this is a general point that we can see in life as well. So if I go to Bosnia, and if a Bosniak tells me your country is also corrupt, what do you tell me? What can I say? I should first deal with my own problems, I can say. Just like I'm sounding a little bit pessimist and a little bit awkward maybe, but personally, how I positioned myself while doing this research was that I'm not here to tell people what to do. I'm here to point out and highlight what I see, and that's all I can do about it as a researcher. And maybe as an activist, what could be done is to repetitively highlight and point out this issue, and saying that this is what kind of impacts this might have in the end, or what kind of results this might have. And if that person wants to buy it, then he or she buys it. If not, so it's a massive problem of histories that you have been asked, that you ask. I'm sorry, with my very little knowledge, I can only answer it from my personal position.
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, it's a huge topic, and I'm not expecting that with our little river fight we can change corruption in many countries, but I think that hydropower really shows it very well, and it might be the stories that people are telling each other about the corruption in hydropower that opens somebody's eyes. Yeah, obviously me telling this from an Austrian perspective, not living in Bosnia. But also here we are facing corruption, and I really like what you pointed out, saying that it's very important to deal with the problems in your own country, because maybe there is where you understand them the best, even though if you don't know about them. So yeah, thank you.
With this, I'm sure you can just unmute yourself and
sorry.
just.
So I wanted to say that the problem is not just corruption itself. I think that people don't know, like they are just focusing on the advantages of renewable energy sources, and they just forget about the drawbacks. Like on the news, on TV, they just advertise it as something like the future for sustainability. So maybe if we just make people aware of the problems, or just working on like improving these technologies to be safer in the future, can be a solution for this. Because maybe people who are not in the field working on that, they don't know that, they just believe what they hear. So yeah,
Well,
that's
of course,
really
misinformation is one of the key points as well. But I will also, let me tell you one more thing about this issue, is that when I visited this village that I started my case study, people were against hydropower plants. But then I realized that what I heard, stories of protests and everything, was not really happening there. And when I asked people what was wrong, or not like this, of course, I was trying to understand what was going on there, that they were slightly changing their minds about hydropower plants, although the situation was the same from the surface. Yeah. And what I realized was that they were looking for a solution to save themselves from this deprived economic conditions. Yeah. And they were saying that, okay, maybe hydropower plants are bad, but I'm going to sell my land because this is my land and this is my decision. So this is also like next to misinformation is one of the reasons why most of the people are being, so to say, cheated, but also they can also make this decision by their own will, by knowing what could happen in the end as well. Yeah. So the Arabs in Bosnia and Herzegovina, for instance, from the Gulf countries, mostly from Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, they were visiting the country like very often, and I was really surprised by the fact that how come these people know about Bosnia and Herzegovina, even like nearby countries might not be visiting this little country so often. Yeah, so they come with the huge buses. And what I found out in the end, this is not a part of my project, but I was also collecting information about it, that they were buying lands with water springs located within this land. And what they were doing was building huge buildings with jacuzzis inside and draining the water outside and putting the water up to the jacuzzis in the buildings. And they were selling these apartments to rich people from these countries. Yeah. And how they do this was also a little bit strange to me, because to me, you as a state, you should protect your water springs. Yeah. And you shouldn't sell lands. Yeah. Like in Turkey, you cannot just randomly go and buy a land as a foreigner. And what they were doing was to have agreements with local business people, that they were showing these locals as the biggest shareholder, and then they were buying lands own them, and then they were then changing the owning rights, not in real, but behind the table, behind the doors, and then they were building these buildings, and these are the local people who agree with that. So it's not only about misinformation, because you should be like, you should have this logic, you know, as a normal human being. It's not a rocket science to see that if I sell this land with water spring in it, then this is not going to be good for me, for the people who are living here. So it's not only about misinformation. But yeah,
Yes, I got it.
right.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think it's a good point. The way you said, indeed, I think in general, at least 90% of people still think that hydropower is a really green source of energy, right? There's still a tendency to develop it, and it's easy to say yes to a project like that regarding, like, if you would be considering climate change stuff. Interesting. David, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I also wanted to ask something. No, I'm really curious about how you went on setting up your research, because I mean, I do physical science, research on the physical. So I set up my surveys. I go in the field and measure. Social scientists, they do their surveys, they set up their experiments in that way. But how do you research something that people probably don't really talk about in an open way? So you can't just survey people and ask them, have you done something wrong? Because it's all kind of hidden, right?
This is recorded, right? Maybe I shouldn't like explicitly tell you what I really done. I bribed some people. No, I started from this village, amazing village, Martinbrod. By the way, I can advertise how amazing this village is. There are like hundreds of springs, waterfalls in this village, and it's just like a gift of nature. I started from this village, and it's like a snowball technique, we call it. So you start speaking with someone randomly, maybe, or someone who might give you an information that you might need, like the village head, or someone who's like the vice person in the village, whomever you call it. And then you start like asking whom else to speak with. But I didn't exactly tell them what my research was about, because in the beginning it wasn't really about corruption. It was about the hydropower plants that are to be built. Yeah. So I was asking around the village. I was asking about, because this village is located in a national park, and I was asking about the national park, a lot of questions about their lives from the time of Bosnia, and compare their lives with the others, and then the situation, what are their concerns about living in this national park, and also maybe hydropower as a development project in their village. And then you speak with the officials and bureaucrats and everybody, and then everybody tells you something, and then you start chasing information from here and there. Speaking about corruption was much easier than I was assuming in the country. I've got a lot of information that I couldn't use, that I heard some things because either you don't record it, because they tell you to stop the recorder, or they just say it like, I heard a friend of mine who got a bribe, you know, who sold these concessions, and really high level corruption stories that I was hearing. So it was rather easy to me to speak about corruption. With the locals, I didn't really ask them about corruption in the hydropower business per se. I'd rather ask about how they experience the corruption in their own country, and they freely speak about it, because they're really, most of them, I would say, they're really like fed up with the situation, because whatever you do, you have to bribe somebody. And this is really annoying, because when you consider that the people there, they don't really have good economic resources. And but like one funny thing was that one of the guys who was the friend, or I don't know, and someone who knows the mayor, the previous mayor, who was in jail at that time because of receiving bribe. He was this person from the village was speaking about this mayor, and he was saying that, oh, he only received 1,000 euro, and then what's wrong with that? Why do they put him in jail? Just, it's nothing. They shouldn't put people in jail because of so little money that they received as a bribe. It's not that much. And you see that you can speak about corruption with these people so freely, because it's like, yeah, it goes on. And unfortunately, of course, it's really sad. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know.
Interesting to hear.
Yeah, and then.
No, sorry, continue.
I mean, if you're really asking methodological details, then I applied semi-structured interviews, which means that you follow a certain logic of like thinking, not even maybe the questions, but you follow a certain logic of topics, and then you follow these topics, and then you want to hear stories from like a similar orientation from the people. I mean, of course, they're here and there jumpings, but and I also applied a questionnaire, a household survey, but I didn't mention about this because I didn't really use that information. And yeah, I guess I don't know if it was clear enough for a natural scientist from a social scientist point of view.
No, definitely. It was just interesting to see how. Do you have any experience in studying this kind of topics in countries where maybe corruption is not where it exists, because it exists everywhere, but it's not such an open topic where people just really talk about it? Because I feel like there's places where it's, Well,
in Turkey, you cannot really hear people speaking about corruption so freely. They would rather hide, and they would say they don't know. Well, in Bosnia, they also say they don't know. So the first sentence that I memorized was ne znam, which means I don't know. So the first thing they say is like, I don't know. But then you open them more easy. But in Turkey, it's rather difficult. But my concern was in Turkey, when I was doing research, my concern was that, yeah, sorry. I was going to come back to that question in the chat, but I cannot speak Bosnian, but I could understand it more than I could speak. What was I saying? Yeah, in Turkey, people are not really willing to speak about corruption. And also my concern was not really corruption when I was doing research in Turkey, but rather potential impacts and people's opinions about certain projects that were about to develop.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, corruption is a fun topic in the end. If you don't feel really, if you don't become like Immanuel Kant and then you say, oh, how can people lie? And then this is not ethical and stuff, and you get frustrated, and then that's difficult. But if you can become a little bit more objective and distance, not objective, but distance, and then it becomes a fun game to play. Then you find ways of like, okay, I made some maybe not so good things to make people speak, like buying them drinks to speak more. Of course, I didn't use this information, but I made certain people drunk to speak a little bit more, give me some more information.
I'm always doing that.
I cannot do that with my river and my stones in my.
Yeah. But the rivers and stones, they're more free to speak. I believe human beings are more challenging. You wouldn't want to be a social scientist. I wish I was a biologist rather than a sociologist.
I wish that Casper could talk to you. I don't know if you've heard about the game.
Yeah, she's
I
gonna
think
play
we
it.
could learn a lot from you.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to play that game. I'm going to win that game. You know, I know.
The game
I know
also
every-
involves some rakia usually, so you know.
Well, I don't drink anymore, so.
You don't
Might
have to
need
drink.
to
You
if
have to
you
get
wanna
other people to
convince
drink.
Right, to get them talking.
It's good. What
That's
is your?
actually for. Sorry,
Sorry.
Ellie, go.
No, you. It's a different question I have.
I wanted to just indeed make the link to this game for all people that don't know yet. We had a student last year that developed a game. We called it the corruption game. Now we call it the valley to make it a bit more neutral and get more people to play it. Only realizing afterwards it's really about corruption. Anyway, it's definitely, you mentioned a few like emotions there, right? Like frustration and really like maybe get even jealous or whatever. Because we realized that just a lot of people, even including myself, like I didn't have a clue about corruption, that it's happening that much in the Balkans, and like many stories come up that you just don't believe that it's actually existing that much, right? So you like thought of making a game so that more people can experience it. And like people will be playing that on Sunday as like the game night of the students for Rivers Camp. So any of you that wants to play it and try it out, it's cool to play with 4 to 6 people, and we can send it out. So just send me an email or something, and I'll make sure you get it. I'll send my email here. Yeah, and Özge will also be playing, and then we're very much looking forward to your feedback because we want to develop it a little further, so actually people around the world can really learn something valuable. So it would be cool to get your feedback there. Ellie.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask if you, I mean, I don't know if you will, but if you have a little outlook for us, like what do you think has the situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina gonna develop? Because there was this thing where they said, oh, we won't give any more concessions for small hydropower plants, but then it was again one of these stories where just one of the two, I don't remember, was it Republika Srpska or the other one? Anyways, what do you think? Where is this gonna go in terms of hydropower? Are they gonna build more or?
Well, I will show you something that that might explain a little bit more. Just a second. So this is the potentials of different potentials of the global proportional comparison of the different categories of global hydropower potential. So there is one gross potential, which is to define all natural runoffs at all locations and potentially available for hydropower exploitation. But then there is this technical potential, which indicates the potential can be harnessed under current technology. Yeah, so if the technology develops, this can grow. And there is also this economic potential, and this indicates the cost competitiveness of the technical potential compared to other energy resources. So it shrinks a little bit more. And there is this tiny little, not tiny little, but like less big exploitable potential, which is to consider environmental, social, economic, and other restrictions. And if you expand these restrictions, then you have like much smaller exploitable potential. And if you have like more loose restrictions, then you have a bigger exploitable potential. And there's this developed potential. And based on this, I will stop sharing. Based on this, we can say so how they plan is according to most of the time the technical potential. Yeah. So what we see as numbers is this technical potential, because they don't want to consider exploitable or economic potential to represent that there is a big potential. But because we don't know the variations of these potentials, when they say we have 1.3 gigawatts of technical potential, we might assume, as someone who's maybe out of the sector, we might assume, wow, we have huge potential. But maybe the exploitable potential is only, I don't know, 1 gigawatt or so, or maybe, I don't know, 0.1 gigawatt of this technical potential. And when we don't consider this, then eventually what you're going to end up is not being able to build this total number of planned projects. And for sure, this 4,000 is not going to be materialized because there is not even exploitable potential, or not even technical potential, or maybe not even economic potential for it. Yeah. And also considering the environmental change and the shifts in the water resource, the amount of the water resources. This is also one of the growing research topics, is that, okay, we do plan that many hydropower plants, but what then the climate change models tell us about how realizable, how much potential we have to realize these projects. So eventually, these projects are not going to be built to the extent foreseen, but we can say, even if they don't build to the extent foreseen, they are going to build a certain number of projects which are going to ruin the environment in the end anyway. Yeah. So this is one conclusion that I can make. They're going to build hydropower plants, but not maybe 4,000 or more or something, but still as like dangerous enough to take some action against these projects.
Okay, and in terms of legislation for the future, do you think anything is going to change for real this time, or they will just keep playing around with it?
Well, this is in connection with these like huge international or transnational powerful actors like EU, yeah, like the World Bank, like the all these fundings coming from this big international funding resources. They're aware of the situation. They're not stupid, yeah, but they keep funding these projects, and that's the problem, yeah. And also one more thing, the hypocrisy of these so-called clean green countries like Germany. Germany, they don't want to build hydropower plants in their own country, but they can build hydropower plants in Bosnia or in another country nearby, yeah? Or any other country like Italy, yeah? Italy is a big actor in Bosnia as well. And also like the other big, let's say, like powerful actors, yeah, yes, Austria too, exactly. And these big actors that if they want to play around this, they can play around this because they define the sustainable development rules, yeah. If they define it according to the fact that, oh, this country has such a high hydropower potential and this should be exploited, but so certain measures can be restricted more than ever, this is still playing around. And there's so many aspects that we should consider, not only corruption in that sense that we mentioned, but also the role of these countries, the hypocrisy of the Western countries in this case. Yeah.
Well, that's good. Thanks a lot for all of these insights. It's kind of showing that it's a big battle to fight, / something we maybe are not going to be. We knew that this was going to be kind of the end of this talk, right? So I'm very much looking forward to next week when you'll join the panel discussion, that we can actually talk with a few more people about this very interesting and super important topic, because I think it really like kind of illustrates what's happening in the world, and we need to at least have a grasp of what's happening in this direction to be able to protect our free-flowing rivers, right? Like it's the context that's necessary there. So thanks all for joining. I don't know if there's any questions left at this moment. Anyone else? Anyone that resonates with this, that feels like, oh yeah, this is exactly what I see happening all the time, or maybe the opposite. And if not for this moment, then I invite you all to join us next week. Yeah, Özge,
However,
thanks a
I will
lot.
still be out until next week after talking so hard about everybody in every country.
I'm happy you didn't call the Netherlands out at all. But I do
Well,
feel part of it. No, all good, all good. I think, yeah, it's interesting to also definitely look at your own country, and I would be interested to hear somebody talking about the Netherlands and the corruption happening there, because I think it's a lot more within the higher societies and nobody knows, because they're just better and care more about hiding it, because you have to hide it better, I guess. But well, this can be a long discussion still. Let's stop for this moment. I think we've been talking for an hour at least. And looking forward to next week if you'll join.
thank you very much, and
Maybe a final word. Yeah.
thanks for having me, and thanks for listening.
Thanks
I
for
really
doing this super
appreciate
valuable
that.
research and pushing that. And I know it's not been the easiest PhD to do. So, super cool.
I'm not doing research about corruption anymore. I'm done with it.
You can start doing stuff about rivers. It's nice. Always positive. Cool.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming
See you
here.
soon.
Yeah, see you. See you, some of you
See you
next
next
week.
week.
Bye
See you
bye.
next week.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye bye.
Ciao.